The bill adopted by the Senate creates the Alabama Long-Term Nursing and Children's Care Commission. The bill's sponsor, Albert McDonald, says it's intended to expedite Medicaid reimbursements to nursing homes, high-risk nurseries, and pediatric care hospitals. The commission created by the bill would be a subdivision of the state Medicaid agency, but would be the sole authority in determining the method Medicaid reimbursements would be made to the specific Medicaid providers that were listed. However, it would reportedly cost the state an extra $100,000 a year to run this new administrative commission. The restrictions of budget isolation in transmitting that bill over to the House weren't any problem, except that it took a short while to gather the necessary 21 senators into the chamber to vote the bill out. Over in the House, the representatives moved a number of local bills out and didn't have any problems mustering the necessary 63 votes per each bill to overcome the isolation restrictions. But the House, for the second time this week, adjourned before taking up any bills of statewide application. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale says budget isolation hasn't been that large a factor in the House slowing down. He says the first few weeks of any session are traditionally slow. The number of bills being introduced continues to mount. 53 new bills were introduced in the House today. That brings to 450 the number of bills offered in the House. There were 22 new bills offered in the Senate, bringing their total number of bills to 321. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
It took the commissioners an hour to discuss all issues relating to Stockman's job performance. During that time, Commissioners John Knight, Frank Bray, and Joel Barfoot asked Stockman to explain why they weren't given advance notice of the meeting that took place on January 19th. The three commissioners also asked Stockman to explain the emergency procedure he followed and the closing of the courthouse during the extreme cold weather. After Stockman's explanations, the commission approved Barfoot's motion for a public apology from Stockman, a letter of reprimand in his personnel file, and an order placing Stockman on probation for 5.5 months. At the end of that time, the commissioners will review his job performance again. In addition to Stockman's reprimand, the commission also decided to investigate the feasibility of a beeper system for the commissioners, as well as a new telephone system for the courthouse. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
This is Georgiana Hospital. It serves a population of 2,100. Like most small towns, there's only one doctor. Georgiana's doctor is R.M. McCrew, well-liked, respected by the citizens, and apparently good at his trade. He says he'll have to leave the town unless a city hospital board agrees to pay for doctors to come in 2 weekends a month to spell him from his 24-hour-a-day on-call, 7-day-a-week work schedule. The board says a hospital can't afford to pay another doctor $1,000 a weekend to replace Dr. McCrew because the hospital is losing money. 9 months ago, when he first came to Georgiana, the hospital board picked up almost the whole tab for the business expenses incurred by Dr. McCrew in his private practice. The board also paid to have a physician to come in once a month to give Dr. McCrew a weekend off. Dr. McCrew says that was part of the incentives the city offered him to leave his practice in Florida. Hospital administrator Steve Pierce says the incentives were only offered until the doctor established his practice. Pierce says Dr. McCrew has a lucrative practice and can afford to pay the physician to come in for weekend coverage. Dr. McCrew says he's agreed to pay his business expenses, but will remain firm on the issue of time off. Caught up in the middle of the squabble are the people of Georgiana, some of which have taken the doctor's side and are protesting against the board's position. At present, the situation looks hopeless. The doctor is looking for another town to apply his trade, and the hospital board is in the process of forming a search committee for a new doctor. Reporting from Georgiana, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
The request came from Sue Scott, a representative of the Montgomery Council of PTAs. Mrs. Scott asked the board to follow the same custom as the Montgomery County Commission and the City Council by having an open forum at the end of the board meeting. She says the forum would be used to question or comment on items on the agenda or any other school business. Mrs. Scott says she realizes the board would like to restrict an open forum on items on the agenda and impose certain time limits. She suggests a 2-minute limit for each individual. Mrs. Scott says parental input to the board would help the members when it comes to making decisions about the school children. One board member asked why the parents didn't simply ask to be placed on the board's agenda, but Mrs. Scott says if that's done, the individual can't question any of the board's actions. She says if an item is to be placed on the agenda, it must go through the superintendent's office and must be submitted at least 1 week in advance. The issue was referred to a board committee made up of Foster Goodwin, Nellie Will, and Henry Spears. The board is expected to vote during next month's school board meeting. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Early yesterday morning, the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee started to work on identical bills. At the end of the day, the budgets didn't look at all alike. Changes to the Senate version flew fast and furious, and even today, legislative fiscal officers said the changes were confusing and in some instances made changes the senators didn't anticipate. There are just over $1 million in amendments that hang in limbo. But overall, the Finance and Taxation Committee took the governor's budget and cut out more than $14 million in programs and transferred them to the general fund budget. Unless changes are made to the general fund budget later, those transfers could create about a $12 million deficit in the general fund. But the $14 million surplus to the education budget that was created by those transfers was quickly eaten up by more than $12 million in increases to all sectors of education. That left the education budget with about a $4 million surplus. But it has been reported that the Senate committee will consider a 16 rather than 14% teacher pay raise. If that occurs, the Senate version of the education budget will also have about a $10 million deficit. The House Ways and Means Committee accepted about $2.5 million in amendments that didn't create a deficit budget, but only left about a $48,000 buffer in a $1.4 billion budget. The House education budget offers a 14% salary increase for teachers. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Governor James talked little about budget isolation and a lot about the oil lease windfall package, which goes up for voter consideration in March. James explained the concept of the isolation measure, saying lawmakers must concentrate on passage of the general fund education budget before other bills can be transferred from one chamber to the other. James said the isolation idea is in the best interest of the people, and so is voter approval of the 3 amendments in the oil lease windfall package. The first amendment locks in the money in a trust fund for 20 years. The second allows the financing of projects included in the plan, and the third lists every project to be financed.
Schoolhouses, roads, bridges, prisons, mental institutions, the chip channel down at Mobile, the Department of Youth Services renovations in Birmingham and several other areas. Each project is listed, locked into the Constitution, the financing is locked in, the perpetual trust is locked in, and the people will get a real value.
James takes to the road in late February to urge Alabamians to vote yes March 2nd on the plan which he says doesn't contain 1 penny of political pork barrel in the package. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Congressman Dickinson told the group the Mount Meigs facility and the staff are outstanding, and he pledged his support to the state agency. The congressman says the increase in the illegal drug trade is one of the most serious problems facing America and its youth. Dickinson said he was happy that the last session of Congress passed a law that would allow the armed services to help drug enforcement agencies in stemming the flow of illegal drugs into the country. Dickinson also told the group he received confirmation from the White House that President Reagan will speak to a joint session of the Alabama legislature on March 15th. Although the White House has not released the reason for President Reagan's visit to Alabama, Congressman Dickinson believes the president will seek support for his new federalism plan.
This is not the only state. He is also going to Tennessee, I think, on the same swing. And so I think really is to solidify himself with the support of the people and to explain in more detail what is embodied in the so-called new federalism, where we're trying to decentralize the federal government and turn more responsibility back to the states. I would imagine that's going to be the thrust of his remarks.
Dickinson says he supports the idea of the states receiving more power and money that is now controlled by the federal government. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Not more, to turn more responsibility back to states.
In addition to the preliminary design for the new jail, Pearson Humphreys Jones & Associates has also drawn preliminary sketches for a new judicial building. Architects presented 2 different plans to the judges. The first and more expensive of the 2 is a 4-story structure that would house Montgomery County's entire court system. But the county commissioners say they won't be able to finance such a building, so an alternative plan was presented. Architect John Gandy says the plan would also include a 4-story building. He says the basement would house the law library and other storage space. The first floor would be used for the district and circuit clerks, court administrator, lounge and receiving area, and the second and third floors would house 6 courtrooms and judges' offices. But under the plan, the court system would be divided. The family court would still be in the existing courthouse, and several judges voiced their disapproval. Judge Sam Taylor says Montgomery County has a unique situation and that all the judges hear a variety of cases. He says each one isn't limited to one particular area and can help cut down the court case load. Commissioner Bill Joseph says it's the judge's responsibility to operate the court and the commission's responsibility to provide the facility. He says any cooperation from the judges is helpful, but says eventually the county commission must make the decision as it sees fit and hope that that decision will please most of the people involved. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Bicycle motocross, or BMX racing, is catching on in Montgomery. In fact, 200 youngsters in the area aged 6 to 21 have taken up the sport. And not only are they racing, but some are doing quite well at it. Take, for instance, 12-year-old Don Williams. Back in December in Indianapolis, Indiana, Don captured the Novice World Championship for his age group. He was presented this huge trophy, which any racer would love to possess. And as you can imagine, Don is sold on BMX racing.
I had my 3 mains, and in one of the mains, my front tire slipped out from under me, and I got back and got a second in that race. But the rest of the races were pretty good.
Seems like you really enjoy this sport. You look like you're totally committed to it. What's in the future for you?
Well, hopefully I'm gonna keep racing, and when I race a year past 16, I'm gonna turn expert and hopefully race pretty good.
There are 2 big problems that confront motocross bicyclers in this area. As you can imagine, the hobby is an expensive one. The bicycle alone can cost close to $1,000. Another problem is the lack of a facility in Montgomery for the youngsters to practice and compete on. Right now, all they have is this converted vacant lot behind Eastdale Mall. Tonight at 10, we'll take a look at these problems. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
This is the Opelika plant of West Point Pepperell Manufacturing Company, in which the 5 former employees say they were exposed to cotton dust that eventually caused them to contract bisonosis or brown lung disease. In the 5 suits, officials of West Point Pepperell, along with Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, are charged with knowingly permitting employees of the Opelika plant to work under hazardous conditions which led to brown lung disease. They are seeking $6 million each in damages on charges ranging from fraud to negligence. At a news conference today, one of the former employees filing a suit against the company, Carol Spraggins, says she hoped the suits would help to correct some of the conditions she says exist in the plant.
I hope that what we are doing today will encourage other textile workers, those who are sick with brown lung, and those who may get sick later, to stand up for your rights. Your health is the most important thing there is. No one, not even the company that has paid your wages, should be allowed to take your health away.
West Point Pepperell officials this afternoon say the plant was a safe place to work and that precautions are taken to prevent employees from being exposed to cotton dust. They also say there's an ongoing educational program as well as a medical program in the plant to make the employees aware of the dangers of breathing cotton dust. Mac Carmack, WSFA TV News.
The Second Amendment allows the financing. And the Third Amendment does something that I think a lot of people really don't understand the significance of. It lists every project we shall buy. Together and go to the bank and borrow them, which means you will not have proration. If they pass the legislation that I'm talking about, given the money that Rex recommended, we should know a way to make it an emotional issue with you. And give it mission and give it authority. Your children that go to Auburn, Alabama, Troy, South Alabama, any of our junior colleges will suffer the consequences. It is that simple. We
That's the program on which he ran. That's what people elected him to do, for less federal government, not more, to turn more responsibility back to states, to turn more sources of revenue back to the states, to cut federal taxes, and then let the federal government do less and let the state government do more, and that's what the Constitution originally envisioned, and this is what he is trying to do, and I'm very supportive of it.
Quite some time, but it was after the information Corporal Ward received, we passed it on to the Detroit Police Department Homicide Squad, and they checked it out and verified that he was there and the location he was at, and he was arrested last night. They did effect an arrest on him, and from what we understand at this point, no resistance was offered on his part, and he is in jail up there on the awaiting extradition.
We think it brings to the attention of the judiciary and to the public as a whole that people are going to start fighting and being verbal and speaking out in behalf of the unborn.
The Supreme Court, that's the Supreme Court of the United States, and all of their decisions pertaining to the matter of people and minors being able to obtain abortions without consent of parents, have indicated that the courts can place, the states can place reasonable restraint on those. And I think that hopefully this will bring to the forefront of the courts and the legislature the necessity of less remedy in this problem rather than have this type of situation arise again.
Only from the standpoint of our feelings, the feelings of the family, the feelings of the daughter, the feelings of the lawyers who represented.
The theme of the two-day meeting in Montgomery is education for blacks in the 80s, opportunities versus obstacles. Dr. Teague's subject dealt with the role of federal, state, and local government in ensuring equal education opportunities. Teague says the future strength of our country depends on a strong public school system. He also said if the would-be censors of state educational materials had their way, school children would not get the education they need and deserve.
Let it be recorded, I'm totally against smut in the classroom. But I'm not for letting a few individuals will that their narrow and limited views be taught, nor only their beliefs be taught to youngsters as facts and the only facts.
Dr. Teague also took a dim view of President Reagan's new plan for federalism that would transfer management of numerous federal programs to state and local levels. Teague said the new federalism boils down to less federal taxes, less federal regulation, fewer federal dollars, more unemployment, and less education. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
$490.75. Now, Sam, this bill, get your accounting right now. It is supposed to be $2 million. $500,000. Hey, goodness, that's not much money on Wall Street for a lot. On the last day of January.
So I think they put Birmingham and Mobile in February, if I'm not mistaken. One of the two other major cities.
Well, you know, I don't know that. I thought about it coming down here.
Get along with me, get a kiss. All right. So
is 64-54. Same story there. Lanier leading the ball game throughout. Terry Calhoun, the big man for Lanier, he pumped in 16. Norman Harris added 14. Darrell Weston hit for 12, but cleaned the boards for 13 rebounds. Marvin Humphries faced the ball for 14. Calhoun had 12 losing effort. On the season, Lanier improves to 12-9. Jeff Davis falls to 3-12. Rick Barnes, WSFA TV Sports.
We are filing these suits because the company's officials knew of the dangers of cotton dust, knew we were getting sick, and let us keep working in the dust that was destroying our lungs. We kept working in the dust until we became too sick to continue. We are filing these lawsuits for what the company did to us and to prevent the company from acting as they have in the future.
Aiming toward that big show.
BMX, or bicycle motocross racing, is a sport that's becoming more and more popular in Montgomery. Close to 200 youngsters aged 6 to 21 are competing in races sanctioned by the National Bicycle League. It is, however, an expensive sport. The bicycle, made of light alloy metals with precision hubs and bearings, can run as high as $1,000. And when you throw in helmet, gloves, and racing outfit, the price can climb another $200. But the major problem concerning racers in Montgomery is the lack of a facility. There's no track in the Montgomery area, and the only place available for practice is this converted vacant lot behind Eastdale Mall. Bill Williams, the father of 12-year-old world novice champion Don Williams, says the lack of a facility keeps big-time BMX racing from coming to Montgomery.
If we can just convince the right people that this is a worthwhile thing, I think we can really wind up with a nice track here in the Montgomery area. If we can do this, we will pull riders from Atlanta, Birmingham, Florida, and several out-of-state riders will be coming to Montgomery. But once they drive 300, 400, 500 miles to a race and the track is not suitable and they're not happy with it, they don't usually come back.
Williams and other parents and racers are hoping that the interest in BMX racing will soon grow throughout the city and county, so that others can enjoy the sport just as much as they do. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Our public schools have always been under attack, but there's groups. Their single issues change from time to time, but the groups are usually the same. They all seem to be merging now to hurl one attack after another against the system. There are those who simply do not want to support the schools financially. Some want to inflict their narrow views and beliefs on school children. Those who want their own schools financed with tax dollars, so they do not support the public schools in any manner, but constantly degrade them. The sad thing about all these malicious attacks is that they're all coming at the very time that the public confidence in public education is returning. The fact that in our state our children are achieving above the national average while we spend far below the national average on
opportunity in education.
And our little fun. When you give me a topic that you gave me, then invite Congressman Buchanan.
The street side in the electrical room is inboard. It has more or less like that. This one shows an administrative isolation block on this floor. On another tractor, the cost of the jail came up with X number of dollars, and then by saying what a quote would cost, we worked backwards and came up with a biggie size bill. It also produces difficulty programming. You have to determine what would you have in it. What facilities does the court need to satisfy the needs for 10 years and in 1980, trying to plot where the court system would be. And the dotted line that you see there is indicating what the court should be on the assumption that it's 4 stories high, what the basement would be.
Kentucky's high hopes for this season have been overshadowed by the absence of number 31, 7-foot center Sam Bowie. Sam has not played a single game this season as he recuperates from a stress fracture discovered last year when he led the team in scoring, rebounding, and block shots. This season, Sam Bowie's chief role has been as a cheerleader on the sidelines, but he hopes even that will help.
Well, anytime we're winning, it makes it a lot easier sitting on the bench. But when we lose a couple games and I feel as though I could be out there contributing in some way, it makes it that much more harder sitting on the bench. But so far, the year's been good to us, and I think that I can still contribute even though I'm not on the court.
While Sam Bowie must soon decide whether to redshirt this season or return to action, his replacement is doing very nicely. Mel Turpin, number 54, a sophomore, has been scoring in double figures for Kentucky, and he leads the Wildcats in rebounding.
On a tip, officers stopped a van on Government Street to question 2 young men about the robbery. On a tip, officers stopped a van on Government Street to question 2 young men about the robbery. Police say the van started to drive away. The officers fired shots. The driver was injured. 16-year-old Michael Ashley was shot in the back. Ashley is in stable condition tonight at USA Medical Center. Police still haven't connected Ashley and the other passenger with the robbery. A wad of money was found inside the van, but no weapons were confiscated. The station attendant who was robbed was called to the shooting scene. She said Ashley was not the robber. Police Chief Winston Orr announced the case would be turned over to the grand jury. Police Internal Affairs is also investigating the officer's action. Sergeant Raymond Grissett fired the shot which wounded the 16-year-old driver. Sergeant John McCants approached the van and shot a tire as it drove away. Both men are still on duty pending the outcome of the investigations. When the grand jury hears the case, it will consider several legal questions.
Whether there was a right to stop the vehicle, whether there was a right to detain it, whether there was a right to use force, and if so, how much force. It would be a very complicated case from a legal perspective. It is.
Delano says the key to those answers lies in the facts, which are still being gathered.
Reed touched on a number of subjects, among those the importance of parent-student involvement, greater awareness of problems facing public schools, and the future of black colleges. Reed says television is to blame for the failure of most students.
We must not let the television sets be the curriculum for our children in our homes. It is very easy, but it is devastating for our children.
Reed urges parents to become more involved in school activities and attend PTA and school board meetings. Regarding black colleges, Reed says if schools are to be merged to reduce cost and duplication, mergers should be made all across the state and not just in some areas.
On the future of the predominant black colleges, there can be no compromise. We are not going to stand idly by to let some board member from the State Board of Education decide in his district, we're going to do it this way, and this district will be done the other way, and if it's going to be done, it has to be done a statewide plan to desegregate public education.
Reed says the events that take place in black education within the last 18 years of this decade yet to come will determine the kind of black education for the next century. From the Civic Center, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
It was not the usual sort of thing one might see along Highway 31 south of Montgomery. A group of people, some with shaven heads, wearing orange robes, beating drums, carrying banners, chanting, and walking from New Orleans to New York, all in an effort to bring about world peace. A group of Japanese Buddhist monks initiated the World Peace March last year in Japan to bring an end to the nuclear arms race, global disarmament, to prevent what the marchers call an ultimate global war which would annihilate all humanity. A tall order by anyone's standards. But World Peace March spokesperson Ellen Sweeten says that's what the marchers will ask for when they reach New York in March, during the second United Nations special session on disarmament. And they won't be alone. 4 other World Peace March groups walking in from other parts of the nation will join them, spreading the call for disarmament. But when it comes to international defense and politics, can a small group of people, no matter how far they've walked, really make a difference?
It's hard to say, if one was to say how many minds were going to change, I don't know, but more countries in the world are asking the UN for disarmament than those who are armed. Their theory is that one blesses the land as one goes and one prays, and that somehow that higher power that most of us believe in one way or another can stand up in the face of fear and defeat and can allow the powerless to win.
The walkers will stay in Montgomery a few days, making brief trips to Auburn and Prattville before heading on to Atlanta and then up the East Coast. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Okay, for homework assignment, we're going to have language tonight. Take out your language book to page 139, please.
The bane of every student, homework. A necessary part of the education process, to be sure, but one looked upon by pupils as disruptive, primarily to television viewing. Resigned to her fate, however, 10-year-old Susan Hayden has tackled the task at hand, in this case, math. Most of the fractions come easy, but there always seems to be that one that just doesn't make sense. It's time to place a call for help, not to mom nor even a fellow student, but to dial a teacher.
Good evening, science and math.
Yes, I'm having trouble with a math problem.
On the other end is Dan Konecki, by day a teacher at Tate High School, and for 2 hours this night, a private phone tutor. Susan's problem is worked out in a few minutes, but as she finishes up her after-school work, Dan's starts getting harder.
Okay, they give you 4/5 times n equals 8/25.
4/3 times n equals 8/25.
Tonight, Dan and Woodham High's Bill Willis will take in more than 60 such calls from students in need. Funded by a $5,000 state grant, Dial a Teacher operates from 6 to 8, Monday through Thursday nights. On Mondays and Wednesdays, lines are open for science and social studies help, while Tuesdays and Thursdays are reserved for English and math.
Are you learning anything from students calling in, learning things that will help you be a better teacher?
I'm learning where a lot of their weaknesses are, which so far showed up primarily in division and multiplication tables for the younger students. So it's been quite interesting.
In less than 2 weeks, Dial a Teacher has become so successful, another teacher will soon be added to handle the phone traffic.
How many people have started the long march with us, but after the first mile post decided to join? The people who make outrageous proposals, I say. But one of the things that we've got to understand is the self-discipline that goes with being responsible. There are a lot of people who ask for things who have no idea or thought as to how they're to be paid for. Responsible people make responsible suggestions. Responsible people offer responsible solutions instead of making suggestions that they're absolutely to them about the briefness of his remarks and for why be redundant. And I say again, they've got to recognize that their party has got something they can do. And this is the wonderful part about our society. Everybody can do something if they will. He has been able to keep the British Empire and the war with, when all was gone, with love and honor. And he went
When Missouri plays on the road, Tiger center Steve Stepanovich is the target of most fan abuse. Stepanovich accidentally shot himself last season, an incident which may always hang over his head. Last season, shot was a bad word for Stepanovich, but this season is different.
I noticed the sign they had up over there that said Steve-O can't shoot, and I guess they're referring to something other than a basketball because he shot that pretty well tonight.
Stepanovich scored 21 points in this win over Nebraska, but the Tigers haven't relied on one player this season. Everyone in the starting lineup can score, so Missouri seems to have a different hero every game. Stepanovich says that might be why the Tigers have moved into national prominence.
You know, our team is not centered around any one person, and therefore any one night somebody else is going to take the load. Frazier's been doing it this year a lot. John's been doing it this year a lot, and I think that's a big difference from our team this year from the last 2 years.
After the SEC upset of the year Wednesday night against Mississippi State, the Wildcats came out blazing. Dirk Minifield feeds Derek Hort on this layup. Kentucky leads at 18-12 early. They led by as many as 10 points in the first half, where Hort scored 14 of his game-high 21. Georgia managed to stay close throughout the half behind the efforts of All-American Dominic Wilkins. He scores here on a slam dunk after an offensive rebound. But Minifield ran the Wildcat fast break to perfection. He drives the length of the floor to put Kentucky on top by 10. In the second half, Georgia coach Hugh Durham had little to smile about as the Wildcats' big men overpowered Georgia. Melvin Turpin slams it home to put Kentucky ahead 44-30. Georgia continued to fight back as Wilkins brought the Bulldogs within 8 with this slam off a steal. Wilkins led the Dogs with 20. Minifield continued to run the Wildcat attack as he converts a steal here into a three-point play. Kentucky goes on to win at 82-73 over Georgia. The Wildcats improve their conference mark to 7-3. The Bulldogs slide to 3-7.
Alabama's prisons are constantly overcrowded and under court order to make improvements. All this week in the 6 o'clock report, Gina Gregory talks about problems in prison. Don't miss it. Since 1976, Alabama's prisons have been under court order to make changes in living conditions and medical care. Last year, a federal judge issued 2 orders for mass releases of inmates to ease the constantly overcrowded conditions. One of those orders was carried out last July, and 277 inmates walked to freedom. The other order is being appealed. This week, Gina Gregory talks about the problems in prison, what they are, why they exist, and what's being done to correct them, each night during the 6 o'clock reports. How and when did problems begin in Alabama's prison system, and who's to blame?
Irresponsible leadership and direction in our state government over the past 10, 12 years in that legislative body created a great deal of problems, not only in prisons, but in other areas.
All this week, Gina Gregory reports on problems in Alabama's prisons, how they started and how they can be solved, each night in the 6 o'clock report. Overcrowding is the major problem in Alabama's prisons today, but Governor James says he can change all that.
I don't know why they got that way. And no need to worry about the past. The present dictates that we've solved that problem, and the only way to do it is to build some new prisons.
Gina Gregory reports on problems in prison each night this week in the 6 o'clock report.
When it gets down to the question of we paying for what we get, we might not have as many social programs, and I'm not convinced that that's all bad.
But you wouldn't be for just turning your back on the people that really need it.
No, that's the whole thing.
help the people that are genuinely in need. That's the function of government. But don't take this guy's money and to give to this guy over here because this guy over here doesn't want to work. And that's what we've been doing. We've built in a disincentive to work all across the whole spectrum of federal government, it seems to me, when you can't get people to work because they might lose their unemployment compensation or they might lose their welfare check because by going to work it would disqualify them, then we've built in a disincentive, and it was never intended to be that way, and we see it all too often.
The State Corrections Department is looking for a few good men. They expect to hire as many as 60 prison guards in the next few months.
This is a list of requirements concerning your physical agility examination.
This is the first opportunity that I have had to look at a group of applicants this large, but I believe that the group as a whole are above the average.
The applicants will be screened physically, psychologically, and mentally, and their backgrounds investigated thoroughly for the jobs. The ones who clear all that will have to pass a 6-week training course. The people finally hired will go to work at one of the 4 prisons around Atmore. There's a total of about 1,600 prisoners in those 4 facilities. Prison guard is actually not too bad of a job. The starting pay is in the $15,000 range, and the hours are fairly regular. But it is hazardous, as dramatically pointed out in recent state prison riots in New Mexico and other states. But the dangerous part of the job wasn't of much concern to these applicants today.
Well, it's not necessarily a prison guard job, just any kind of job that I can find right now. You know, jobs are hard and trying to find something somewhere. So,
prison officials are hoping to have the first of their new guards on the job within 3 months.
And so my original announcement, planned for tonight, lies in a shambles because of the power and the freedom of the media, together with the basic common sense of the people. My statement to you tonight is that I will submit my name to the voters of the 1st District once more in the hope that they'll see fit to return me to Washington for another 2 years.
I have said for some time now that I'd like to put some of that experience to work in the executive branch, and I've been out over the state just getting the ideas from people on what they would like in a governor and the issues at hand and all, and it's been very interesting and very encouraging, by the way.
I want to ask you about...
He gave me no indication at all then that he wasn't going back, and I think that after I've gotten some more information that it was misread when his staff members left.
It's called the Jupiter effect, all the planets in the solar system aligning themselves on one side of the sun. The name Jupiter effect comes from the planet Jupiter because it has the strongest gravity of all the planets, and from a book written in 1974 by two astronomers who predicted an alignment of planets would occur this year and could mean disaster on Earth. But the program director for the W.A. Gale Planetarium in Montgomery, Sam Barnes, says that's just not true. Barnes says in the book the authors propose that the alignment of planets would cause immense tides on the surface of the sun, throwing massive amounts of radiation into space. When the radiation hit the Earth's atmosphere, Barnes says it would supposedly cause such violent atmospheric changes that earthquakes, tidal waves, and volcanic eruptions would begin all over the globe. An interesting and terrifying idea, and Barnes says, an incorrect one. Barnes says, for one thing, the Jupiter effect will never occur. He says on March 10th, all the planets will be on one side of the sun and as near to alignment as we've ever known them.
But they would be spread out over an arc of 95 degrees, and that would include the Earth, that is, if you were on the sun looking out. So they will not be in a direct line as though, well, as the book intimated that there would be.
Barnes says while it's true all the planets exert gravitational pulls on the sun, the maximum tide they could raise would be only the thickness of a dime. Hardly enough to cause massive disturbances, let alone, as some people propose, the end of the world. Now through February, Barnes says the planetarium is offering a show each weekend explaining more about the Jupiter effect and what it does or doesn't mean to our future. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
After 32 years of marriage to an Army Sergeant, Addie Buzzy was divorced by her husband. She receives $45 a month alimony. Catherine Whiteman's divorce came after 9.5 years of marriage to an Air Force major. Her two children received $225 a month after the major personally reduced that from a court-ordered $450 a month. Buzzy and Whiteman are only two of more than 500,000 women in a group called Expo. They say government red tape keeps them from sharing in retirement and other benefits they say they are entitled to after long marriages to career military men. Janine Boyer says she's owed $20,000 in back alimony after her 24-year marriage to her husband, but she can't make him pay.
He is drawing Social Security, VA benefits, and I have not found an attorney yet that has been able to find a loophole where he can put a garnishment on these certain, VA and Social Security. If he was just retired, without the medical retirement, I would be able to draw it, I understand. But
Expo members are encouraged by promises from some members of Congress that a new set of bills now up for consideration may bring some relief to the financial plight of many ex-wives of this country's sergeants, colonels, captains, and generals. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
I can just about get through it without falling asleep. And so it expresses some of my thoughts about MS, and then I'll go on and talk about some of my feelings and everything. So we get this thing turned on, we'll go. Yesterday was a program I saw, I think, on the Today Show. We really have the opportunity in our life to determine our future depending on how we look at it. We can take weaknesses in our lives and turn them into strengths if we're willing to look at the positive aspects of our lives. Meaning, since everyone has some kind of problem in their life, and it really is a question of how we learn to deal with problems, because those problems or some kind of problem is going to be in our life one way or the other.
This is what the class is about, safety. What you should know and do if you own a gun and keep it in your home or if you carry it with you.
Most of the crimes that are on increase happen to be against women, and I just felt that being that I do go out by myself some in the evening to shopping centers and places, that I needed to be able to protect myself.
What was most important to you that you got out of the class?
I think getting over some of my fear of guns and handling a gun and just knowing some of the laws and some of my rights as a citizen, that I can use a gun and when it is okay to use it.
A couple of rules. Treat all guns as if they were loaded. Don't point a gun at anyone unless you intend to shoot them.
We stress safety. That's one of the main things. You have a lot of instances with people, these accidental discharges at homes and things like that. We stress safety at all times. We like to teach the ladies basics about a weapon, the things they should know, especially if they're going to buy one, and the ammunition that they should buy, the kind that they should buy, and also the laws and the liabilities about shooting.
The classes are held on Saturdays, and there are 2 sessions, each about 2 to 3 hours long. Out of 24 people in this class, only 5 are men. Anita Falmer says since the program began in 1977, nearly 4,000 people have gone through. And she says the number of women taking the class has increased every year. The course is taught as a public service to the city by Police Academy instructors. Terms. If you're going to carry a weapon, Corporal Larry Mann says you should know the jargon. This is not a bullet. The whole thing is called a round of ammunition. It's made up of the bullet, case, powder, and primer. What kind of gun should a woman carry? Who needs a permit? Can you take your gun into other states? Should you always use deadly force? These are just some of the questions asked, especially by ladies in the classes. The answers? Corporal Mann suggests a .38 or a .38 special for a lady. Everyone who carries a gun on their person must have a permit, and the permit is only good in the state in which you reside. Corporal Mann says using deadly force is a touchy situation, but he stresses that you shoot to stop someone, not to scare them. And he reminds his class that a weapon should be used in defense of life, and he says you've always got to live with what you do. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News. Shooting a gun has never been my idea of having a good time. I've never owned a gun, never been hunting, and have only shot a handgun once. That is before I took the class. I wasn't scared of handling the weapons. I was intrigued. This seemed to be more of a man's world, sort of macho, which intrigued me even more. The class is fun and interesting. The instructors make it that way. But fun isn't the sole purpose behind taking the class. My safety was the biggest consideration. Being single and alone quite a bit, especially at night, I worry about what to do if an intruder breaks into my home or what to do if I'm assaulted on the streets. The instructors gave some good advice.
To be safe at home, I think the things they need to remember most are keeping the house locked, for one thing, not taking for granted that nobody's going to come in, not leaving the keys outside, these sort of kind of things, and just basic stuff like that.
I know there were lots of questions. What do you do if you think somebody is coming in your house? How do you react? What are you supposed to do? What would you suggest?
What we ask the ladies to do is the first thing, if at all possible, is to call us. And we can get somebody there in just a very few minutes. And if they can, let us come and handle the situation. But if their life is in jeopardy and they have a weapon, then it's up to them to make the decision whether or not to use deadly force.
Something surprising. The instructors recommend that women who own guns and have a permit carry them at all times.
We can't be everywhere, and if the lady's got a pistol and she has a permit, then we feel like it's best for her to carry the gun for her own self-protection. In certain instances you feel unsafe in maybe parking lots at night or wherever you may be, and then the gun is there and you know it's there, and maybe you can just rest your hand on it or something like that. So
we learned how to grip the guns and the proper stance, how to load, and how to use sights.
Were you apprehensive about the class and about firing a gun?
About firing, yes. Very nervous.
What do you think you've learned?
More about the laws and more about handling a gun and to be more careful with it.
What could be more exciting than hitting the bullseye?
Going just, everywhere.
Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
It was standing room only at the Georgiana City Council meeting. The overflow crowd spread through the lobby area outside the council chambers and outside the City Hall building. During the meeting, many voiced their concern of city finances. One resident asked the council if the city-owned hospital is losing money and if the hospital board plans to sell it. But Mayor Albert McGill says the hospital is breaking even and the board members don't have any intention to sell. Another of the residents' concerns has to do with their only doctor. Dr. R.N. McGrew has recently had a misunderstanding with the hospital board. The board currently pays for a doctor to work at the hospital on the weekends that Dr. McGrew has off. Now board members want the doctor to pay for his weekend relief. Dr. McGrew disagrees. He says the hospital should pay for a weekend substitute, but he says he's agreed to go along and accept the board's conditions because of the support he's gotten from local residents. Dr. McGrew says one good thing that's come out of the situation is that Georgiana residents are becoming more interested and involved in their local government. Reporting from Georgiana, Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Mr. Knight made the motion that the local legislative delegation. That's still. Propose these bills. After considerable discussion, the minister was instructed to write individual letters to all members of the legislative local. The motion was duly seconded by Mr. Joseph and as approved by the commission. Participated during this break to be commended for their fine work. And then the first 1982. After a brief procedural discussion, Mr. Joseph moved that the meeting be adjourned to executive session. Motion. Approved by the commission. There being no further business to come before the commission at this time, the meeting stood adjourned until the next regular. There being no these bills. After considerable discussion, the minister was instructed to write individual letters to all members of the local legislative delegation outlining their opposition.
It works like this. The federal government decides to cut back expenses, part of which includes a 45% cutback to the Department of Industrial Relations Employment Services. Meanwhile, unemployment rises to previously unheard of heights. What it all means is more people looking for jobs, fewer people helping them find jobs, and more money going out of the state unemployment trust fund, going out at a rate of $5.9 million just last week. And many state officials say it's not impossible for that trust fund to run out. It did in 1975, and the state government had to get more money from the federal government.
Well, it's certainly counterproductive. It seems to me to be counterproductive. I think the people of Montgomery need our service now more than any time I've worked with the service.
Acting manager of the East Montgomery office of the State Job Service, Charles Simpson, says his office will close in 2 weeks. Its 19-man staff reduced to 3 by federal cuts. But the manager of the State Employment Service on Clayton Street, Sylvia Williams, now says when they're needed most, employment services are serving less than ever, all because of federal cutbacks.
There has been a significant increase of individuals coming into our office seeking work, not only of those who are currently unemployed, but those who anticipate being laid off in the near future. There's a great deal.
And though one state spokesman says it's not likely the state will run out of money this year, he did say if the economy doesn't turn around, by this time next year, the Unemployment Trust Fund could be dangerously low. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
We feel that the demand is going to continue to be strong. It's should be, I think, particularly strong in the next few years because of the current unemployment and changes that are taking place throughout the country in various industries, certain industries shutting down, new industries opening up. Obviously, a lot of change is going to occur as a result of the energy demands, the oil production, energy production is going to take place in our state.